Around 1710, King Naquan would pass away at the age of 90 or so. Several years after his passing, while on patrol with a small band of Maroon regulars, Cudjoe was caught off guard by a British raiding party that successfully penetrated deep into the forest undetected. 5 Maroons were killed in the assault, and 7 scattered, as well as Cudjoe. Cudjoe managed to get to higher ground and threw several of his jungas, killing a few soldiers. But he became isolated from the rest of the group when he was pursued by an officer named Douglas McGowan. Cudjoe took cover in the bushes to conceal himself from his enemy. And when he felt that he knew his enemy's position, he threw a couple spears. Cudjoe noticed that the officer fought stealthily like a Maroon. So laying in wait for almost an hour, he broke a stick and instantly the shot was fired at him, clipping him in the shoulder. But he didn't make a sound. And he changed his position, laying in wait for his enemy to make a sound to reveal his position. For some time it was quiet, until he heard what sounded like a bottle opening. And he sensed his enemy's position and threw his last spear and hit his target, killing Douglas McGowan instantly. A diary was retrieved off the body of the young officer. Years later, when Cudjoe became acquainted with a white prisoner of war who decided to join the Maroons, and paid for it subsequently with military service, he ended up working for the very people who kidnapped him. And he had always heard about the Maroons and studied their fighting style. His final journal entry was written during the standoff with Cudjoe. He wrote how much he admired Cudjoe's determination to live. And he wished it didn't have to come to this. He wished only to return to Scotland, much like how Cudjoe wanted to take his people back to Africa. His final words were, "It's so hot, I'm thirsty." It must have been at this point that he corked his water and Cudjoe heard him and threw his spear. Upon this, Cudjoe lamented slaying the man and wished they could have found peace with one another, for they had much in common. They just happened to be on the opposite side of the war. The Maroons would ramp up their raids, and planters began calling for the end of the Maroon threat. Nicholas Laws became governor of Jamaica in 1718, and in 1720, he would turn his attention to the Maroons. That same year, he signed an agreement with Jeremy, king of the Mosquito Indians, to bring some of his Mosquito Indians over to Jamaica to track down the Maroons. The Mosquito Indians were renowned for their tracking abilities, especially in dense forestry. With their help, the British were able to penetrate deep into the forests, but they were repelled by the Maroons, without being able to find the great Maroon town. The casualties must have been embarrassing, because colonial records refuse to tell us what happened. The British troops and the Mosquito Indians, who came to fuck with the Maroons, they fucked around and found out. But we can't find out what happened. Battle of the Plains. From 1721 to 1728, Cudjoe ordered his men to step up the attacks on the British estates in the plains. One particular battle in the plains that is well remembered in Maroon history took place in Port Antonio in 1728. Cudjoe is renowned in Maroon history for leading this assault. In the dead of night, they descended on a plantation on the outskirts of Port Antonio. They burned down the plantation and liberated the enslaved, and of course plundered their valuables. Afterwards, they took off to the hills and took position in the prearranged places and waited for the British soldiers to pursue them. Soon after arriving at the scene of the devastation, they went up the hills after them, but the Maroons were waiting in hiding to ambush them. Suddenly, the startling sounds of horns and drums echoed through the mountains. Disguised as trees, them chop up the soldier them with spear and machete. Reports of trees coming to life and a choke man appear in the reports of the soldiers in the British archives. Cudjoe had a policy that when he captured a prisoner of war, he gave them an option to join the Maroons or be set free back in the plains. Unlike Queen Nani and Cudjoe, who favored execution, for those who wished to go back to the plains, he blindfolded them and took them back down in the cover of night. However, a few of the officers taken captive chose to join the Maroons. These men were Stephen Gregory Harris, David Fuller, and Neville Jameson. It was Harris who translated the journal of Douglas McGowan and in time would become close friends with Cudjoe. It may have also been this battle that Cudjoe obtained the sword that once belonged to Captain Morgan. Spying. Cudjoe was said to be a gifted spy. He often dressed up as a slave and went down to the plains to gather intelligence. Cudjoe developed an information network with the enslaved kin on the plantation. This is why Maroons were always prepared for a British invasion. The Confessions of a Captured Maroon named Cyrus records that Cudjoe and his brothers, Kofi and Kwashi, operated as spies in Port Antonio, and that they were close with the slaves of the governor, and they were fraternizing with the enslaved on Colonel Nedham's plantation. It was also reported that while dressed as a slave, accompanied by two white boys, they bought gunpowder with forged passes in Colonel Nedham's name. He played the role of a slave to the governor and listened in on important meetings. This is probably how his brother was able to steal the governor's horse right before he had to go to an important meeting. He also played the role of a slave, carrying the bags of the famed British Admiral, Sir Charloner Ogle. Cudjoe would take the opportunity to liberate him of his sea captain uniform and other valuables. Soper's invasion in 1730. Due to the carelessness of a few Maroons coming back from a raid, the trail leading to MILTON was discovered by Captain Soper. It could be said at this point the war intensified as prior engagements were held away from Maroon territories. Soper was given charge to invade MILTON with a party consisting of white militiamen as well as black volunteers referred to as black shot, as well as baggage Negroes. Soper would successfully reach MILTON and momentarily occupy it. However, many of the baggage Negroes and a few of the black shots deserted and joined the Maroons. and the Maroons soon regrouped and retook their town. Regiments from England, 1733. After Captain Soper's failure, there were many more failed attempts at taking down Cudjoe and the Maroons. So the British brought out the big guns, and they called for a special regiment from England. This special regiment was supported by the white militia, the black shots, and volunteers of various backgrounds. Some Maroon sources say the Mosquito Indians were also employed during this battle. During this battle, Dinah, Mali, and Nanitone momentarily came under British occupation, driving the Maroons into the woods, beginning the Catawwood period in Maroon history. At this time, many Maroons ventured to the other towns Cudjoe had created in the west that were still yet to be discovered. According to Maroon oral history, the English Special Regiment, along with their Indian guides, in searching for the remaining Maroon village, took over a fake village. In preparation for this invasion, Cudjoe had his men create a fake Maroon town and allow the British to occupy it. A tall British officer got on the bullhorn and called Cudjoe by name, demanding his surrender with his people. However, instead of a reply, all he heard was the whistling of the wind as hundreds of spears rained down on the village, violently killing the troops and forcing a retreat of those who remained. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Make sure y'all smash that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments section, share the video as it helps the algorithm, and subscribe for more. And if you like this video and want to support this content, then click the super thanks button and donate whatever you feel like, or you can hit me up in the Cash App. Link in the description. Special thanks to my sources, Maroon Family History, and these 3 books, link in the description. That does it for part 3 of King Cudjoe of the Maroons. Make sure you check out part 4, and if you haven't seen parts 1, 2, make sure you go back and check that out.